Hi, I'm George Maestri, and today we're going to take a look at how to create windows that cut through both sides of a wall. Now, if you are drawing your buildings with thick walls, you'll understand very quickly that windows don't always cut through both sides of the wall. So I'm going to show you how to create a nested component that will do exactly that. So first thing I need to do is create a simple wall. So I'm going to just draw out a simple rectangle. Let's go ahead and make that, say, 12 feet by 5 inches. Now, 5 inches is going to be the thickness of my wall, and I need to remember that. And then I'm just going to go ahead and pull that up to make a wall. So I'm going to make that maybe 10 feet high. So now that we have this, I'm going to draw a simple window. Now, I'm going to show you the problem first, and then we'll go ahead and solve it. So first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and draw a simple rectangle. And then I'm going to select this face and push it in 5 inches. And what does that do? That cuts a hole in the wall, and that's wonderful. And if we turn this into a component by selecting all of these inside edges and going Edit, Make Component, you could actually make it so that it glues to any side. We could cut the opening, and then we could set the component axis by left-clicking and dragging here, and then dragging that green axis up, and we could just hit Create. What that does is it creates a very nice component here. And if I drag that in, you'll see that it cuts through, but it only cuts through half the wall. We don't have the other side cut through. And this is just a feature of SketchUp or maybe a bug. We don't really know. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just undo my way out of that. And let's go ahead and create something a little bit different. Now, this is where you can start to follow along. Now, what we're going to do is instead of creating one component on one side that's supposed to cut through both, we're going to actually create a component on each side. So each component is responsible for its own side of the wall. So before I do this, I want to make sure that everything lines up. So I'm going to draw some guidelines here. I'm going to take my tape measure tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and bring that in, say, 12 inches on this side, and then just kind of drag down another 12 inches. And then I'm going to do the same on the other side. I'm going to go ahead and drag this in 12 inches here and 12 inches there. And so what I've got is I've just got a set of guidelines that give me a common corner, so that way I can line both components up. So let's go ahead and draw a window. So I'm going to go ahead and left click and drag, and let's go ahead and make this, say, 24 inches by 24 inches. Just make a small window there. And I'm going to go ahead and create this first window before I do anything else. So now I'm going to go ahead and push in my window. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit P for push and push that in 3 inches. And when I do that, it creates an inset, but not all the way. Now, I'm going to actually put a material on this so we can actually see this window. So I'm going to go into Materials. And then under Glass and Mirrors, there should be a translucent glass safety. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that translucent glass safety. And what we've got here is now we've got a window that doesn't go all the way in. But I'm going to go ahead and select that center face, and then select all connected faces, which should select everything. And then let's go ahead and make it into a component. So I'm going to go ahead and make it into a component, make sure we have glue and cut opening, and then we can replace the selection with the component. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Create. What that does is creates this nice component that allows me to drag it in. But notice how it doesn't cut all the way through the wall. Well, we can fix that by drawing another component. So I'm going to go over to the other side, and let's do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and left click and drag, and let's do 24 by 24. And this time I'm going to push this one in 2 inches. Remember, the other one was 3, so 3 plus 2 is 5, which is the depth of the wall. And then I'm going to go ahead and select that face and just go ahead and delete it. So now I have two sides here. The first one is this one's the component, and then the other side we're going to turn into a component as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just select all four of these faces that bound that window. And again, make component. Cut opening, glue to any, replace selection, hit create. So now I've got two components here. So I can go ahead and delete one, and the other one will be there. I can select that and delete it. And if I wanted to bring those back in, I can go into my components window. Component 1's that front window. I can align it with that corner. Component 2 is the back side of that window. And again, I can use my move tool to align it. So now I've got these two components, when used together, can create a window that cuts all the way through. And as you can see, it cuts through. But we want to be able to make these so that we can align them as well as bring them in as a component. So one of the first things I want to do is understand how to move these. So if I select, say, the front of this window and I move it, notice how it just moves off of the other one. I'm not selecting what's behind it. Even if I were to go like this, a lot of times it's kind of hard to select because now I'm selecting my guidelines. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a handle on each window with which to select. So I'm going to select this first component, double click on it to open up, and then I'm just going to use the circle tool, and I'm going to go ahead and go somewhere around the center of that window, and I'm just going to drag out a circle. And then I'm going to double click off of that. So now we've got this circle here, and I can select that to select this front component. And now I'm going to create a matching one on the opposite side. So I'm going to select this component, which is component 2, double click to open it. And again, I'm going to draw another circle that's basically or exactly the same size as the other one. Now this one actually puts in a face, but I'm going to go ahead and highlight that face and delete it. Now when I click off of this, now we have this kind of circle in the middle of this window. And now all I have to do is select that circle, and it selects the entire window. So all I have to do is just click and drag on that, and it selects both sides of the window. And that's pretty cool. And so now that I have this, I can now start to drag in these components again. So if I drag this one in, you'll see that, well, again, it's got that window on one side, and I can drag this one here, and it's got, again, that component. If I wanted to, I could move them to line them up, but this is actually going to be a little complicated. So I'm going to actually do something a little bit more efficient. I'm going to go ahead and make two of these components into another one. So I'm going to go ahead and select both of these components, and then we're going to do Edit, Make Component. Now this time, I still want to glue to any. And when we do that, notice how these axes come in, but we want to go ahead and set those. So I'm going to go ahead and left click and drag along the red axis here, and then drag up and snap to that endpoint. And that should create this plane that's parallel to the face it's on. And then I want to make sure I do cut opening and replace selection with component and do create. Now what that does is it takes that first component and it turns off the windows for that. But I'm going to go ahead and just hit delete, and that gets rid of it. But now we have a third component that we created called component 3. Drag it in, and there we go. So now I can move this around, and it moves as a single component. But we have one little problem, and that's that this component is still not cutting through the back side of the wall. But we can fix that by just right-clicking on this and hitting explode. And when I do, it puts it back to two separate components, and now I can see through. So this is kind of a little workaround, but now I can drag this one in, align it, right-click, explode, and now I've got windows that are clear. I'm going to go ahead and select these components and delete them. Now these handles are still a little bit of a problem because, well, they're in the middle of the window and they're not supposed to be there. But we can fix this by creating a layer. So I'm going to go down to my layers panel here, and we're just going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call it handles. And that's for these handles. So I'm going to go ahead and double click on this first component, select just this edge, go into Entity Info, and select it to Handles. Click off of this. Now go to the other side, click on this component, double-click to open it. Again, select that circle, turn it on to the Handles layer, and again, click off. Now, when I turn off handles, I can just turn off all the handles by clicking on this layer. So now I've got a pretty nice little system here. So I go into Components, select Component 3, drag it in, drag in another one, and maybe drag in a third one. Now notice how these three are not fully transparent, but I can shift select them, right click, do explode, and now they're all transparent. And if I want to, I can now highlight all of the handles, use my move tool, move them around. I can still snap. And then when I'm done and I'm ready to present, all I have to do is switch off those handles, and those are bona fide double-sided windows. So hopefully this method will give you a little bit more flexibility in how you create your window components.